story begins with a sanctuary full of bodies and a guy shining in the middle, nothing out of the ordinary. This man is the master of the White Magic Tower, who sacrificed everything in his final battle to save humanity and defeat the high echelon of demons. This man is called Oscar Sage, the magic master of the White Tower. After dying in a very theatrical way, 20 years later he wakes up in another body without understanding anything. Still in this body, he discovers that he was poisoned and that he was instructed not to remember anything else. So he chooses that this time he will live just for himself and damn the rest. A destroyed shrine bathed in bodies had a person glowing at its center. He uses some kind of magic on the ground asking for an answer, because if there were any survivors, they should respond. And if you can't speak, you must move or make some noise. He begs while emanating his magical power, thinking that in the end there was no one, and he was the last survivor. But there was someone in his pupil saying that the one who first consolidated the demons, leading humans to complete collapse. His name was High Priest. The man with white hair repeats some words in an ancient language, saving a baby from the hand of a demon, leading away from those creatures in the war against the demons who came from their demonic plane. And the wizards from the White Magic Tower followed him, putting everything in line for the future of humanity. If it weren't for them, no one could have done it. A female humanoid figure appears in that bloody sanctuary scene and says that on April 28th at 3:12 p.m., it confirmed that the High Priest was no longer breathing. The wizard calls that woman Edna, with the final dragon and observer who records the story, Edna Sol Laplace. She calls the master of the White Magic Tower saying that she has good news and bad news, and the wizard tells her to start with the bad news. Edna explains that the demonic army invaded the White Tower, and in the process, most of the wizards lost their lives and destroyed the tower, with wizards and research incinerated. The Tower Master asks about the good news, and she tells him that the Imperial forces came earlier than expected and will save the survivors and his disciples. Coughing, the man says it was a relief, but Edna wants to know if he regrets today's school. He denies it because of the person he chose and brought to himself. He cannot regret this choice in front of them. Edna wants to know if he has anything to say. The man asks to take care of his disciples from time to time as they were young and anxious. Edna says she would look at them occasionally. He mocks a dragon, revering a mere human. The dragon explains that he was right to realize this for the continent, and she will not forget the sacrifices that the White Magic Tower made. The man says it was clear if that was the case, reflecting that it would be a lie to say he had no regrets, as he was the best wizard, but a bad leader. But if by chance he gets another opportunity, even if he is called a villain, he wants to live selfishly just for himself. Thinking about taking care of your disciples, the man wanted to live that kind of life. Edna closes the eyes of the Magic Tower Master, saying that at 3:47 p.m. she confirmed that the master of the White Magic Tower, Oscar Sage, was no longer among the living. The High Priest took the lives of hundreds of mages in action, and even the 9th level mage, Oscar Sage, who lost his life in the process. In an immense tower, there was a light breeze. A man with black hair was lying in bed, and a man with white hair looked at him. A leaf touches the man's hand. He suddenly gets up scared, while the blue-haired one is hit by his hand and spills the water, saying he was all wet and was changing his towel, because his sleepwalking habits were irritating and he doesn't show gratitude for being taken care of, and the man repeats this, saying that he slept and in his state of almost losing his life, and more importantly, he thought he would lose his life, saying he's sure the High Priest had pierced his heart. Then he tries to say what was happening, but is interrupted. An angry blonde man says he was awake. The blue-haired boy tells the old man to calm down because he woke up 5 minutes ago, but the old man tells Frank to move because he would be sure to make him pay. Oscar Sage asks how he was alive. The old man repeats this angrily and says that he must find it fascinating to be alive, while Oscar notes that he must be a wizard from the White Tower. So he tells him to explain the current situation in detail, and the elder repeats this. Enraged at having to explain, he steps forward to slap him, saying he should reflect and beg. Oscar asks about the attack and if it was an assassin planted by demons, using the windshield that would block any attack instantly, and the wrist facing the wind would become like straw. He was a low level who didn't think before attacking. Wondering about the windshield disappearing, and what kind of pathetic magical power was that? The old man moves his hand, saying that the shield was good and he wasn't fooling around all this time. He would propose disciplinary actions regarding the research actions and should focus on recovering for now, and Frank tells him to go his way. Questioning if Oscar was crazy while the boy trembles, thinking that the shield disappeared the moment he used it, and wants to know how long he slept. Frank comments that Elder Maxim had that kind of personality and he was toast, while Oscar reflects on how his mana circles, quantity, and purity were bad. Wanting to know what was wrong with his body, he asks what day it was. So Frank replies that it was September 21st and he was unconscious. Oscar wants to know if he was sleeping for 5 months, and Frank wants to know what he was talking about, because it's only been 1 day. Oscar says that either way, he should call Lloyd, and if he's not there, call Gilly or Shasha and hear their exact situation. Frank tells him to forget about these traitors and wants to know why he was saying the name of the Tower Master informally, and if it was side effects of having forgotten. For Lloyd Schultz abandoned the White Tower and became a disciple of the Master of the Red Tower, and Gilead Dominic stole and ran away with a high-level book. Oscar notices that the air around Frank was not moving. Then repeats about Sasha being the Tower Master and wonders how a 5-year-old did it. Your friend wonders why leave out the 20 before this. The wizard thinks that Sum had an incredible imagination and wants to know why he was getting angry with a young man. But that was completely natural. Seeing a strange reflection in the window, Oscar wonders who that was in the mirror, saying he can't believe it after seeing this as it's been 20 years since he lost his life, and they developed a lot. Now having things lighting up the streets and even cars driving around. This was all thanks to the magical engineering revolution. Thinking they must have loved seeing this, because even as the world collapsed, they just gave up on everything. And organizing everything you learned about the owner of this body, Oscar Crushen was taken by the Magic Tower when he was 10 and is now 20, a level 1 wizard from a fallen noble family. But he's a horrible wizard for being level 1 at 20 years old. And as a result, he tried to hasten his progress by purchasing an illegal elixir, and after taking it, he collapsed. It all made sense because if it worked, it would increase his mana several times, and if he spoke, his life would be in danger because it was illegal, having lost his life due to overload. But you noticed something different about your body. Wondering what that was because he had a lot of mana for a level 1 mage, and it was the purest of them that hadn't been refined yet, wondering if it was obtained through that illegal elixir, but some drop of blood comes out of there. Dripping through his finger, Oscar asks what that was. Impurities come out of your index finger, falling to the ground and then dissolving. Oscar is surprised to see that, wondering if it was some kind of poison, and why was that on your body? But he says he understands that, since I had a hunch about that situation. Firstly, his illegal elixir was not to blame, as a proper elixir would be impossible to purchase even at a higher price. The problem was that Oscar didn't know there was poison there after thinking about how so much liquid came out. In other words, he didn't lose his life due to overload, but poison. And this level of poison was too high to have taken the life of a level 1 mage, and if it hadn't been for him, it would have been difficult to find traces of it, clenching your own fist. Oscar gets up and says he doesn't know who was playing with his soul, but consequently, he had a second chance after thinking about it before losing his life. A selfish life for himself, and that wasn't a bad start for her. Saying that as payment for Oscar Crucian leaving him this body, he would get revenge for him. On the outskirts of Siren, a person says he got news from the store. Your boss asks to be called in formally and the subordinate apologizes, but the boss just wants to hear the news. So, the subordinate says that the stores were destroyed from the inside by some wizard, and his boss slams the bottle on the table asking who did it. He explains that the wizard was looking for the person who sold the elixir, and if it could be Oscar Crushen, but the boss denies it since he was a theoretical wizard and couldn't do that. The subordinate asks if the White Tower decides to investigate. His leader asks if he doesn't remember who asked him to do this to Oscar. He was wearing a white rook ring made for a wizard of hers. Oscar asks what kind of stupid thing could be so obvious where they come from, and his subordinate quickly turns around asking who it was. The boy appears from the window heading towards them. He reflects that he looked for the spark of smell in the bottle, and there were more people involved than he thought. His boss asks if he really destroyed his store, and Oscar confirms it was him. But he was interested in what the two were talking about, asking them to continue the conversation. The boss says he thought about Oscar acting like he didn't hear anything, ordering his subordinates to take his life. The man advances towards Oscar, drawing his sword, while the wizard says that if that was the game they were going to play, he wouldn't back down. Launching a gust of piercing wind towards the subordinate, that blow had left cuts on his body. Losing his head, Oscar thinks he can't believe it was just that. The boss shouts Bart's name, pointing a gun at Oscar and calling him a bastard. He fires 3 projectiles at the wizard. Oscar comments that this was a bit interesting, using a windshield because it doesn't detect any mana, and wants to know what principle was being used to produce so much power. The boss shouts that he stopped the bullets, and Oscar asks about the name, because it was intriguing and would return it to him at the right time, repelling the projectiles against the boss. They hit your chest, belly, and leg, making the man fall to the floor while calling him a bard. Oscar approaches, saying that all sounds in the room were blocked, so no one would come to rescue him. The boss questions how a mere level 1 wizard can do a level 5 silence spell, and Oscar says that he used the sound link so the noises wouldn't come out. But I would be grateful if he answers your questions, and you want to know who asked to try to take your life. The boss tells him not to talk shit, but is interrupted by a kick to the face. Oscar comments that his pride was more valuable than his life, and it wasn't bad at all. Getting some kind of spell on your body, because he starts to feel immense pain all over him. Oscar connected the wind with his body, and it was as if thousands of needles were piercing him from the inside. But he says he doesn't like playing with people's lives, so he should speak up soon. The man begs him to stop because he would tell everything. Oscar agrees and undoes the spell, telling him everything he knows about the patron. His boss says that he gave an elixir and some money, saying that they should sell it at a low price to Oscar, and they accepted, while Oscar asks what he looks like. The man says he has a hood so you can't see his face, but he was definitely wearing a white tower ring. Oscar asks about this, thinking it was probably a strategy to trick this man, but the boss says it has a unique smell, like a refreshing, clear mint, and that's all he knew. He asks what he was going to do after taking his life, and the boss tells him that it was difficult for White Tower because he was removed from the 4 main towers, and he doesn't know if they will investigate. Oscar asks what he was talking about, and the boss wants to know if it wasn't something he should know. The wizard uses the excuse that he forgot this after consuming the elixir, and the boss tells him to give him the documents. Looking for documents inside a drawer. He hands them over, saying they were the relevant documents. Oscar thinks that starting with the White Tower, having April 28th as the day of the White Night because the high priest lost his life, and among all the towers it was the worst and would have an important announcement on the White Night. Oscar reflects on the White Tower not having advanced magic because he remembers Edna's documents to prevent something like that from happening. Ordering the boss to tell the business of the 4 main magic towers. The Yellow Tower of the West controls electricity and opened a great era of magical engineering, contributing to the creation of revolutionary items, while the Southern Blue Tower contributed the businesses of drinking water, agriculture, and potions. And the Red Desert Tower of the East entered military ranks, helping in missions to subdue monsters. Oscar asks about the White Tower. So the boss says they make deliveries. The wizard is perplexed to hear about this, asking if he talked about deliveries such as items, and the man says that the wizards from the White Tower can fly and have an advantage in delivering items quickly. Oscar questions what he was hearing, thinking that the wizards of the White Tower fly high in the sky and rule it, being seen as freedom and bravery, being compared to dragons and eagles. Oscar asks who came up with the idea for this ridiculous business, and the boss says it came from the current boss of the White Tower. The wizard reflects on having been his own brats, asking about the farming industry and drinking water, and whether potions weren't a magic tower's biggest source of profit, and why the Blue Tower took over this. The man says that the Blue Tower monopolized the potions, and Oscar remembers that the White Tower was the biggest but lost everything when the methods were burned. So the chief says that they sold water at a high price and brought rain to an area facing drought. Oscar questions why they buy pure water, but the man explains that it's crazy for rich people recently. The wizard complains that they acted like clowns for a few more notes and can just drink water from the well, reflecting that the magic tower cannot compare with the other towers, and it was true that the business growth of the others was greater, and the festival would be their last chance. The boss remembers Oscar over his body, and the wizard thinks he was losing his life thanks to the shock and having lost a lot of blood. Oscar reflects that they gave good information and whether he should be saved, talking about arson, attacking people, having illegal cargo, extorting money, and even requesting murders, and that he was practically a piece of trash with legs, jumping out the window without saying anything. Oscar is telling him to be a good person in his next life. In the dawn of the White Tower, he enters a room saying he was tired, but he can't believe he was exhausted from just using basic spells and wants to know what this body was, and if in his current state he could use that magic. The magic that made Oscar Sage the greatest magician in human history being the wind file, but it's scattered and says you can't use it yet. He needs to improve his body's condition first and start with a scanning spell, because you need to read more information about this body at the same time. His memories were a mess, even with Franks giving some information, but it was crucial to know about Oscar Crucian if he wants to know how to save this body. He was heir to Earl Crucian and the only survivor of a disastrous mansion fire. The entire magical world recognized him as a premature genius, and their expectations were high, with all forces trying to recruit him. In 6 years, he entered the Magical Empire's college but failed to score anything but magical grades. With the extraordinary thesis he published, it was easy to prove that he was a genius. Wondering how someone like that was still level 1, and that was the reason for the bad luck. Since he had mana deficiency syndrome, but could have been a great mage capable of representing his generation, Oscar repeats about this syndrome, and if it was true, it made sense that he would be a level 1, since he understands magic better than anyone but can't use it. Oscar says the scan was ready, having the results confirmed and noticing something different, since he doesn't have mana deficiency, and an impressed Oscar says it's not a disease, but someone sealed his circuit. Mana deficiency syndrome prevents you from accumulating magic, and even with 20 circuits, those who have it cannot go beyond level 3, as they cannot establish a connection. Therefore, Oscar Crushen was a different circumstance. His physical circuit was not innately twisted and was tied by someone on purpose. If this guy was really a genius, he should already know that he didn't have mana deficiency syndrome. It would have been amazing if he wrote it in his diary. According to Frank, Oscar Crushen was an alcoholic, wondering if it could be a character he created on purpose. He knew that someone blocked his circuit, and after that he acted spoiled on purpose. If this is the case, he will understand why he tried the illegal elixir, since in this situation he will not believe anyone. Oscar needed to undo the chains that were on himself. In contrast, he only needs to join the bonds and would be able to do so. Finding a book among Oscar's fully marked, The Reinterpretation of Basic Magic, Oscar starts reading about it. Becoming aware of something different from your point of view, some papers warn that the trajectory of the wind cut was tedious, and the windshield, which is a defensive magic, could be used in the attack, analyzing weapons. Oscar thinks that the concept behind the advanced windshield was similar to how he was using it, completely different from the idea and principle of a defensive skill. Additionally, he wrote about how to use it in each situation, and there were many basic spells that he created himself. He can't do his magic by himself, but he performed all these experiments in his mind. Understanding that he was called a genius, as they were similar in how they interpret the theory, and in addition, you can tell just by looking at this one book, he didn't give up on magic and worked harder than anyone, and his passion screams that he loves magic. Reading the last sentence saying that he hopes the book echoes among the greatest weak winds of the White Tower, being from a wizard who was facing his greatest challenge. Oscar thinks he was aware because he knew everything, but he did it all alone anyway, repeating Oscar Crushen's name while getting up from his chair, thinking that he was a young mage who didn't give up because of his cruel fate and walked silently on a path alone. Sitting on a living room sofa, Oscar swears that in his name, as the 17th master of the Magic Tower, he would undo this knot he cannot tie. Additionally, he would make those who broke his wings pay. In the middle of a greenhouse, Oscar walks around asking why he was going that way, reflecting that he remembers falling asleep because he was exhausted after starting to untie the knot in his physical circuit. But he hears someone calling his master. Oscar Sage was sitting on the floor meeting his disciples. The boy thinks that this was caused by this cursed dream. The Viscount's demon of nightmares had given him a curse, where every time he sleeps, he remembers the past. He honestly hoped that the curse would be lifted after he took possession of this body, but it seemed like the curse was attached to his soul and not his body. Wondering if he could be lucky, as the dreams about his students were not changed and were not emotional pastimes. The children say what the teacher would say, and Oscar confirms it, explaining that magic, although the same physically, is divided into reinforcement, acceleration, balancing, and others. Lloyd says that the White Tower has the type of harmonization, and his master confirms that wind magic was the best. Sasha asks if each magic tower has a magic type preference, and Oscar talks about different types of magic having other affinities. The Golden Tower finds speed more important, having acceleration, while the Red Tower values fire, so uses reinforcement, and the Blue and White Tower use the balance type. Gilead shouts that he wants acceleration type magic because slow things were frustrating, and Oscar says that unfortunately, he can't choose because it was innate. Sasha asks how they know if they were born with it, and her master says it was easier than he thought, asking Sasha to extend her index finger and use magic. The girl says it was her first time seeing this spell, and it would take some time, but her master doesn't rush it, so she uses magic and says there was something coming. Oscar says he was the type of harmony. The little girl asks if he was the same as her master, and he confirms. She smiles and says she liked it. Gilead tries the same, and his master says that just as he wanted, it was the type of acceleration. The little boy starts to celebrate, and his master calls for Lloyd. Sasha says it was a beautiful flower, and Oscar explains it was a special kind. Lloyd questions if he can change his type once it has been decided, and his master tells him that it was a rare type, having less than 1% of mages, and questions why he would change it. The little boy says he preferred the balance type like him, but his master starts to grumble, asking what he should do, since he wanted to give Lloyd more private lessons and wants to know what he would do if he gave him a new guy. The boy repeats about taking private lessons. His master confirms that special type magicians need more attention from their teacher, and the boy says that the special type was not bad, but his master must promise. So they swear with their little finger, and Oscar thinks about that brat Lloyd, since his nickname was the Promised Man. But no matter how mature he tried to be, he was still a child. A radio starts playing on the wall next door, warning that it was an announcement coming from the radio room, calling the wizard Oscar Crushen, as he must go to Laboratory 4202 and wonders how long he slept. Since there are 8 physical circuits remaining, Additionally, when he unlocked his mana circuits, he gained 2 mana lines and was now a level 2. Wondering who thought he would be happy to have reached level 2, and Elder Maxim asks how he feels since, according to Frank, he was better. Oscar approaches and confirms while the old man agrees. Thinking that elder was his junior, the elder being Maxim Bisk, aged 45. Oscar reflects on him having entered the tower many years after him, but now he was old and an elder, but he was honest and diligent, so he would have a good future. He kept calling him senior. Later he called him Magic Tower Master, and he thought it was cute. Working hard as his magic reflected his old age, and Maxim asks what he was laughing about. But it says he got a report about Chief Gordon's family, and was acting like his boss was losing his life. Maxim asks if he has anything to say about this, but Oscar denies it as he doesn't know the reasons why they took his life. But it was because he tried to take his life. The elixir was poisoned, and they had commission bribes to murder him. Maxim questions if that was why he did it. Oscar confirms that he tried to speak, but they tried to take his life, saying that money was totally legit. The book contains the contract to do this, and Maxim says he understands since it was his self-defense. Oscar says he would be grateful, but asks the elder for a personal favor, saying that he would like to find the leader of the magic tower, and the old man closes his eyes, saying that it is not difficult since he must have magical discussions with him. Oscar thinks he was discussing magic with Sasha, and the old man warns him about meeting her in 6 months. The boy is in disbelief, thinking that this was the night before the festival started. Maxim explains that she is on a work trip to take care of an important commission, and Oscar wants to know why the Tower Master was doing something minimal. But he says the wizard was absent and it was shameful, reflecting that thanks to this, Sasha has to go in person and asks for forgiveness for being rude, but wants to know the level of the master of the magic tower. Maxim says that she was at level 7, and the boy realizes that at her age she was already level 9, but she was far away. However, with her talent, she should be at 8. The elder tells him that they would take care of the reports and asks if he was training attack magic once again. Oscar says he would train when he sees it in his mind, and the old man allows him to leave. Someone approaches the door when the boy leaves. Maxim questions what brought the vice leader of the tower there, and Hamo Glimwitz asks him not to be so strict with that child, but it seemed like it was late. The elder says he needs to fight with him if he gets into trouble, and the elder agrees but brought him there and worries about him, thinking that even basic magic couldn't be brought to perfection for a day or two, and he was studying hard hidden from everyone. Then call Oscar a brat because he was working harder than he thought. Hamel asks if they should go to the elders' meeting, as Fidelina was waiting for them. So Oscar goes to the 10th floor and thinks he saw his students in his dream and wanted to go there, saying it was empty there, while a gardener approaches. He says he was young Mr. Oscar while the boy questions who he is. The gardener introduces himself as Wilter and takes care of the Magic Tower's facilities, and it seemed that the rumors of him losing his memories were real, as they talked a lot. Oscar asks how far these rumors were going, and questions what he means by young Mr. Oscar. Wilter says that he had been working there since the former master of the tower was there, Mr. Oscar. The boy is surprised to hear about this, saying that this was a good way to differentiate them, and he would use this too, but he asks if he can continue to be his conversation partner. Wilter thanks him for the offer and says it was difficult, as he would be leaving the tower soon, and the boy asks what he was going to do, but the old man says he has worked there for 40 years. He served 3 masters during his time there, and his colleagues always changed, but he was the only one left in his department. The reason it continued for so long was because the old master, Oscar Sage, said something at his ceremony that everyone living in the tower was needed. Oscar coughs and you say that he seemed amused, but from that moment on, he worked believing that he is a member of the White Tower. The boy says that it really wasn't fun, and the old man thanks him, saying that he would leave anyway. Oscar wonders what he means by that, but the old man says that just as the young master knows, the tower was doing badly recently, and especially in the facilities. Finances were not what they used to be. Next month, he would have worked there for 40 years, and Oscar wonders if it was for the Long Service Award. All members of the tower, excluding mages, receive a Long Service Medal and a monetary reward in their 20th and 40th year of service, so he would receive 200,000. Wilter says that the current tower does not have the money to pay this, and to do this, many people would put their lives at risk to resolve the commissions. He can't accept thinking like that because no matter what they say, this place is his second home. Oscar thinks he didn't know it was that bad, but thought the Azure Tower was doing strange things for money, wondering who he was to underestimate his work since they learned how to make a lot of money and were better off in history. On the other hand, he has only titles. War Hero, Savior of Humanity were honorable titles, but he cannot give rewards to the towers in decades and is so called by Wilter. wondering why he was clenching his fists so hard. Oscar asks when he planned to leave, and the old man says it would be after 2 weeks, asking the young master to go to the infirmary and apply medicine to the wound. Oscar says he hopes he could continue to be his conversation partner, as you don't need to leave. He is sure he would do it, thinking he needs a method to get a lot of money so this never happens again. Oscar later wonders how he would do this, since all he thinks about at the moment are research, readings, and commissions. But it would be a problem if the payment took a long time, and he was still only a level 2 mage. Therefore, he needed a job that paid a lot of money and potions were his only option. Noticing something different when reading the newspaper, he thinks about what he had seen. In the Deputy Tower Master's room, the elderly Fidelina comments that she can't ignore it this time because it was a fraud, while Maxime says that it was wrong, but the old woman interrupts and asks what he meant, and the old man says that the culprit was thinking about it now. Fidelina asks if he would let him go, because stealing was a habit that was getting worse, and Maxime asked her not to worry about it, since there isn't much to steal from your tower anyway. The woman complains about him retorting everything she says and orders the boy to be isolated, but the elder denies it because it didn't make sense to put a level 1 child in this. Hamill says that just like Elder Maxim said, training in isolation could be a bit harsh, since this would be nothing more than disrupting the child's life. Instead, the boy must pay 3 times the money he used. The old woman asks about it being only 3, and Hamill decides to move on to the next topic of conversation, saying they have very little money and need to make a decision soon, since they had many facilities that they didn't use, and if they sold the potion production equipment, they could live well for at least 3 months. Hamill says he won't allow that, and the woman calls for the Vice Master, but he says it was a magic tower where wizards go to study magic and share knowledge. So you didn't have fresh air in a closed room, and you can't sell your future to satisfy today's hunger. The old woman asks if they have a future. Well, they've been waiting for this for 20 years, and Maxime screams her name. The woman sends the deputy master right, because even if there was a genius of that level to save the tower, he wouldn't come to them. Hamill tries to say something, but is interrupted. The elderly woman turns around, asking who they were as they were in a meeting, and the elderly man tells him to come in. Oscar says hello to the elders and introduces himself. The vice master asks what he needed, and Oscar suggests something, because he wanted to start a business and the old woman screams about it. Well, he was funny since he stole the research money a few days ago. Wizards now wanted to start a business. Oscar says he found an article reading past newspapers and says that the state of 20 was in quarantine due to the terrible flu problem. Hamill comments that he saw this too, and people say it must be Cadena flu, which is terrible news if it really is the flu. There is currently no cure for the Cadena flu, and in the past the White Tower had the vaccine, but the recipe was lost 20 years ago. Oscar comments that yes, and the Azure Tower was dominating the potions market. It could replicate that and wanted to start that, saying he wants to sell Cadena flu vaccines as the White Tower had a monopoly in the past and he wants to live up to that. Fidelina says it was not necessary to listen to him. The Magic Tower and the pharmaceutical company invested tons of money in laboratories, but no one was able to replicate the vaccine for the next 20 years. But a 20-year-old brat thinks he could do it. Oscar says that everyone failed. He was a young man of 20, but still, he was a genius above all. Fidelina gets angry, saying he took 723,000 coins and an extra 25,000 for illegal medicine, while a farmer earns 20,000 a year after taxes. But he was a genius, having no idea what to do with money. But Hamill interrupts by calling about the elderly Fidelina, saying that Oscar was there to suggest an official investment as a White Tower wizard and knows she was in charge of the finances, but was being rude. The woman apologizes for that. Oscar says he was wondering why she hates him so much, but it was because she was the treasurer, which makes sense since she didn't do anything for 2 years after all. But he says he was sure of that and asks the woman to consider it, thinking that the owner of this body and he are different. Hamill asks if he was sure it was the Cadena flu, and Oscar confirms by asking him to take a look at page 2 of the newspaper. The old man reads that Archbishop Baldwin changes his plans about the pilgrimage, and Oscar tells him that he would stay in Siren for a month to ask for blessings, and it was strange. Staying in big cities for a month, the Elterra cult worships the mother of the planet, Earth, and had 7 archbishops who were worthy and incorruptible. But the reality was far from that, as they need many payments to become cardinal, saying that he remained in the state to visit the pilgrims for a month, but only found nobles and merchants to take money from them. Siren was a great city in the past, even though it was getting smaller and smaller. Maxime says he was right, and the reason must be prayer for the blessing. Oscar says that was why it was strange for them to pray for arid lands. And as everyone knows, the pilgrimage route of the Elterra Order has already been chosen, being Siren, Mosque, Melbourne, and Greenwale. But after all, they would go to Vince State. Oscar says that the Archbishop stayed in Knox for a month before coming to Siren, but if he wasn't wrong, he would stay in Mosque for a month too, and so on. asking if it didn't seem like he was trying to avoid visiting Vince as much as possible. For if an incident happens during the pilgrimage, the people of the El Terra order will say that they angered the goddess, and it was a sentence from an archbishop. Maxim comments that Baldwin knows about the flu being Cadena and asks if it was taking time for the disease to calm down, and Oscar says that was how it was interpreted. The old woman says that it was a good analysis expected from a theory wizard, but that was it for now. Hamill comments that he understands what he was saying, but you can't sponsor him officially, since they can't find other wizards to do this. Hamill says he would invest his personal money in his money this time. The old woman screams about the Tower Master, and Hamill says everything was fine, since it was only 30,000 coins, and he asks if it was enough, and Oscar repeats about it, thinking it wasn't enough and it wasn't even close. Going to the potion production room, saying that now he has to go to Plan B, and he would make a simple vaccine with money and get more from the Archbishop. He was the only one who was in trouble because of the Cadena flu now, so it would be easier to take money from someone who was desperate. So it was time to get ready now.